I'm Debbie Prentice. I am a psychology professor at Princeton University in the psychology department and the policy school, and it's a delight to be here. I got my degree in psychology and went on to become a psychology professor because I wanted to change the world, which might seem counterintuitive to those of you who think of psychology professors and professors in general as cloistered away in ivory towers, but that wasn't the way I saw it. And I knew of many of the my forerunners in my field who had in fact used the scientific insights that they gained to make real world change. That was my goal. That was the goal of many of the psychologists of my generation. We didn't have the way to do it, but in fact, in my career, that has changed. In fact, now behavioral insights are used by governments, they're used by organizations, they're used by everybody. They've been popularized by the work of my former colleague, Danny Kahneman, and his colleague, Amos Tversky, their work, and the growth of the field of behavioral economics. But now behavioral insights are common, they're taught widely, and they're, I think, used incredibly effectively. So what are the lessons of psychology for the practice of behavior change? First and most important lesson is the lesson in perspective taking. One has to stand in the shoes of the person whose behavior you're trying to change and see the world through their eyes. The importance of that really can't be overstated because once you're really seeing things through their eyes, you'll see the obstacles to behavior, you'll see the motivations for behavior, you'll see what's salient, you'll see what is socially accepted in their world, and you'll see what's impeding them, what's keeping them from being the people that they want to be. Or perhaps that you want to help them to be. So this is the first lesson of psychology really is the lesson in how different the world looks through each individual's eyes, and it's a very important lesson to adopt in this kind of work. So this is really the insight, the behavioral insight that underlies so much of the work that has been popularized, for example, in behavioral economics and in nudge approaches to behavior change, that in fact sometimes you just need a small intervention, just a key targeted small intervention to actually change behavior in a big way. The famous example is that defaults, that is what is taken as people's response if they don't make any response, are critical for determining behavior. So the default is that you're an organ donor, then there are a whole lot more people on the organ donation registry than if the default is that you're not an organ donor and you have to actively choose to put yourself onto the registry. But there are hundreds and hundreds of examples of this. So, for example, during the pandemic, in the United States, some states had incredible uptake of rent relief, and other states had incredibly low uptake of rent relief. And when the behavioral scientists went in, what they found, of course, was that both defaults and the complicatedness of the forms and how many hoops you had to go through, how much sludge you had to wade through in order to get rent relief was in fact responsible. It wasn't that people weren't motivated. It wasn't that people weren't needy. It was that they were facing very different situations that you could only see looking at it through their eyes. Lesson number 2, since I've invoked nudges, let me just say that one shouldn't assume that every behavioral insight will lead to a nudge intervention. Sometimes what behavioral insights will show you is that a nudge will never work. So for example, you're not going to cure an addiction with a nudge, right? You're not going to change strongly motivated behavior with a nudge. You're unlikely to change entrenched cultural and social practices with a nudge. Why? Those behaviors are held in place by so many forces, right, that you're not, in fact, going to be able to dislodge them with a minor modification to the order of food in a cafeteria line, to take one nudge example, or the defaults that are used when filling out a form. That's okay. That's okay. Some things are very hard to change. Some behaviors are incredibly hard to change. And sometimes what one needs to do doesn't come naturally. It's not an easy behavior to enact. Doesn't make it any less important. But the key point is that that behavioral insights, a behavioral analysis, is going to tell you which behaviors are amenable to a nudge intervention, what's going to be easy to change, where is there an easy fix, and what behaviors are you going to have to actually take the hard way, use a shove instead of a nudge to change. And a third point, and this is particular to prevention work. So my own research in this field is actually largely in behavioral prevention. What I've done is develop interventions to help people stop doing or keep from doing things that are harmful to themselves or others. The behavior that I did my early work on, and probably my most work on, was excessive drinking by undergraduate college students. But there are many other behaviors where what you want to do is get out in front of the behavior and change key things, sometimes with just a nudge, but change key factors of the way people are viewing the situation that can change their behavior both immediately and over the long term. If you want to stop people from doing an unwanted action, right? You want to use your understanding of the motivations that are driving them or the psychology behind their behavior to prevent it or keep them from doing it. You've got to give them something else to do instead. Okay, so let me give you an example. In my own work on college student drinking, what I found was, in fact, that one of the main motivations for students to drink to excess, and here we're trying to keep people from drinking to excess, not just moderate drinking, but one of the primary motivations for binge drinking, for example, was that students thought that everybody thought that was a cool thing to do, right? In fact, if you did surveys, which we did, we found that everyone didn't think that was a cool thing to do, but nobody knew that that was the case. In other words, the social norms that had developed around drinking privileged this excessive drinking behavior, even though people's private attitudes didn't support it. That's a phenomenon called pluralistic ignorance, which psychologists have dominated, and it's a great lever that one can use to change behavior, because what you can do, in fact, is simply show people or make them aware of the fact that the behavior that they thought was cool and would make them popular is not going to be seen as cool and make them popular. Takes away the primary basis for the behavior. So this was an insight we had back in the 1990s, and many different interventions were built on this insight. The social norms marketing approach was one of the most common, but there were many others. So you might wonder why there's still binge drinking on campus. Well, the main reason there's still binge drinking on campus is that this step of showing them that what they think their peers approve of, what they think is a true social norm, is in fact not the true social norm. That's a good first step, but it doesn't tell them what to do instead, right? If they're going to parties and they're drinking in order to fit in, and you tell them, well, that's not going to help you fit in. Well, okay, what is going to help me fit in? How should I be drinking or not drinking or doing something else without actually giving them the healthy behavior, right? What is it that people do want you to do? How can I be popular, right? They've still got the motivation, and you can decouple the motivation from the behavior, but that's not going to completely solve their problem. And so in those kinds of situations, people often go back to the behavior that you're trying to get rid of. The psychologist lesson about perspective taking leads to one final lesson that I'd like to share with you, which is the importance of targeting an intervention where it's likely to be most effective. You by taking the perspective of your subject, you're not just seeing the world through their eyes, but you're also seeing your opportunities for creating real change. In summary, we have learned today, you've had a mini version of my course on behavioral insights, that in fact a psychological approach, a behavioral approach can teach us how to intervene, where to intervene, when to intervene, how heavy-handed to be about an intervention in order to change behavior, applicable to all sorts of different kinds of behaviors, and very likely applicable to the kinds of behaviors that you're trying to affect in your work with UNICEF. So It's wonderful being here, and thank you very much.